for some reason, the first law firm that I had that I fired refused to put any witnesses on. So I had to end up firing them.
They didn't agree with that strategy?
Well, they just wouldn't do it.
Right.
I mean, for some reason, anything that helped me, I mean, my own lawyers were getting that no. I'm going, I've got witnesses and they go, we don't want to put them on. I'm going, screw you, I want them on.
Right. I mean, I was there and I heard all the witnesses, and there is absolutely no question that they gave a very convincing account of themselves, very authentic, and completely persuaded everybody. I think that you were on top of these subjects and knew all about it, and were very, very busy with these subjects around the time of the invention of Bitcoin. What's slightly unfortunate, I think, is that none of them, and perhaps it's because you hadn't decided on the name Bitcoin, none of them was able to say, yes, that's right, he told me it's Bitcoin, it's coming up next week or next month or something.
Don was running the Node software.
Don?
My uncle.
Yes,
I mean,
but he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what...
Well, he was still running the software.
Well, yes, no, he was, but he
did, I mean...
But why didn't he... It would have been so convenient if you'd said, I've got this thing called Bitcoin, do you mind running the software for it? But he didn't have that.
Well, he knew it was Bitcoin software after... I mean, he knew what it was. He just didn't understand it.
But he didn't hear the name, I think.
Yeah, but why does that matter? It didn't have a marketing name. I'm not a good marketing person.
Right.
In January 2009, running around going, hey, I've got Bitcoin. And people go, that's nice. What the hell's that? It's this blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I mean, it's better to actually sell it on what it was. I've got a digital cash system, or I've got an immutable ledger system. When I was trying to sell things to Stefan at Centerbet, I didn't run in going, I've got Bitcoin. Because, like he said, well, I don't care. But selling the idea of actually recording information to keep the network secure, that was a possibility. With Hoyts, selling the ability to securely push updates, secure their network.
So they didn't need to know the sort of brand name, as it were.
I mean, an interbank transfer protocol for what's now QDOS. I mean, they didn't care. I mean, all they wanted, they don't really care what the messaging protocols are. They just wanted something secure that worked.
Right.
The same with when I was starting Greyfog and other things with John Keeble and people. That was a smart meter company. And the idea of people wanted their electricity meters to be read accurately with all the proof that it happened and all this sort of stuff. And
if you'd said Bitcoin, they wouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean,
it wouldn't have helped.
And they wouldn't have helped. You would have gone, I'm measuring your meter using Bitcoin, and they were going to go,
yes.
What the hell's that? Then I'd just have to go back to explaining it anyway.
Yes, okay.
So, I mean, maybe I'm not a great salesman or marketing person, but the reality I can see is people wanted a smart meter. They didn't care what the technology behind it was.
One other thing in the sort of legal side of things, you sued Peter McCormack for libel and you won, but you were only awarded £1 for that. And the reason for that, according to the judge, was that the claims that you made for having been disinvited for conferences, he didn't believe them and said that they were factually false, and the other side produced people to corroborate that.
They didn't actually produce people. They said they were going to produce people, and then they didn't. Unfortunately, though, I was no longer with CNAM, and the problem is that to get
CNAM,
which is the university in Paris.
Oh, right, yeah.
To get all of the material together would have taken weeks. I mean, we had 2 days. This was dropped on 2 days before the case, which I thought was rather annoying. We had sort of dropped everything, and not, which I didn't like from my lawyers anyway. So rather than chasing up the evidence and you'd have to go through letters rogatory and because it's an international request.
So you basically made a statement to your lawyers about these disinvitations, but you hadn't actually got the sort of proof on paper. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I would have if we had managed to get her. For instance, my EA booked some of these conferences. And I mean, my comment to my lawyers was, I don't have the emails, but other people do.
Right.
And why don't I have it? Because unlike every other typical useless executive, I don't book anything. I mean, I just turn up to things. So why don't I have the emails? Because my EA puts everything together for me, talks to people, acts nice, is personable, and she's the likable face, and then grumpy old me can run in afterwards.
But okay, so I mean, the judge was very, very outspoken on this. Said your witness statement was not merely inadequate or infelicitously explained. The vice was not that it omitted explanatory background, but rather that what it did say was straightforwardly false in almost every material respect.
That's because we put no evidence on, and that's because of my damn lawyers.
But how did they know it was false? If then I mean,
the other side said this didn't happen.
But in fact, you withdrew these claims just before the case was heard, I think, didn't you? Why was that?
A little bit before. The lawyers told me that they didn't think that would be helpful given the nature of the case. I didn't want to withdraw it, but Adam, the QC, did. And so it's one of the things where I've learned never to ever do anything my lawyers ask again if I don't believe in it. And I've found that has been the case. I mean, where I've fought for things that I want in my way, we generally win. When I do it their way, I've actually got a 100% track record of losing whenever I listen to my lawyers.
Expensive. That's.
I'm not kidding on that one.
Right.
Every single time in my history, going back to the 90s, I've listened to my lawyers and taken their advice. I've lost. Every time I've told them to go, you know what, I've won.
Let's get back to Bitcoin then. You've talked about spending Bitcoin in everyday casual transactions. I mean, when I started working at CoinGeek, yeah, we were little demonstrations were going on where you could go down to the bar and buy beer with Bitcoin and stuff. I mean, is that still the vision?
That's part of it, yes. I'd like to see everyone being able to spend money directly. And this is the whole unbanked bit. It's not about unbanking people. Banks do something that Bitcoin doesn't. They give home loans, for instance. Now, what banks don't do is they don't include people who don't meet their standards. So that's where cash is necessary.
Right.
So in the US, people who either don't have all the right documentation, or they're not earning enough, or the transient workers, a lot of them have payday check services now that they use. And these can take 20, 30% of their earnings.
So it really is, as stated on the white paper, it's digital cash.
Well, think about places like Kenya, where I did one of my doctorates. And Kenya, the average earnings are in the dollars a day. And this concept of BTC and $30, $40 a transaction is just ridiculous. Even the Lightning channel, if you're going to open 5 or 6 channels sort of every year even, just to keep everything open, if you've got the cash, then that's still opening and closing around $70. And for someone earning a few dollars a day, then $350 to $400 is a lot of money.
One thing you mentioned at the workshop that I thought was interesting is, supposing you were paid your salary by nChain in Bitcoin, you said that you might then go into your wallet and move some of that money and send it to somewhere else, because whoever sent you the money at nChain would know what address they'd sent it to.
Or addresses, yes.
Or addresses. And in theory, then they could see whether you'd spent it or what you'd done. I mean, is that a problem? Because
it's just increasing privacy.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, if you then know when I spend my money, then you still know some information about me. Do I spend it straight away? Do I go out that night? That's all information.
Yes.
So as soon as I just mix it a couple of times by sending it back and forwards to myself, you no longer know which one is what.
Right. So if I get sent £100 by somebody, they know what address they've sent it to. how would I stop them just following what I do with it from then on?
Well, make a payment for £11 and £89 to yourself. Then use the 11 and split it up, and use the 89 and split it up, and then.
But they could. I mean,
but
then it would just be they couldn't be bothered to follow it because it'd be so complicated.
But how do you know which one's a payment to someone else?
Right. So that so they wouldn't know. At some point, I may not be the owner of this address anymore.
You know that some time in history that this touched you.
Yes. Right. Right.
I mean, if, for instance, there's a £50 note, and 6 months ago you had the note according to the serial number recording in an ATM, and it turns up owned by some guy working for Hezbollah.
Yes.
6 months later, does that mean you gave it to him?
No. Right. I just want to end by asking you about Silicon Valley and communism, because this is one of your favorite subjects, I think. And
It's not my favorite subject, but it's a topic I rant about a lot. Yeah.
Not many people are worried about communism these days, I don't think.
They should be.
Well, okay, so but this is my question. I genuinely don't understand. You talk about Mark Zuckerberg's ideas are Marxist.
Mark Zuckerberg used to blog about communism all the time.
Right.
If you look at his early blogs, apart from the drunken ones, he used to actually talk about communist society, eating the rich, all this other stuff.
All right, but what is it about Silicon Valley's business model that is communist?
Oh, they're like every typical want-to-be autocrat. So they talk about things like universal basic income and all these other things.
Not as part of Facebook or something. You mean that
Really?
As individuals they believe in that?
It's part of what they're doing. It's
Really?
part of the structure they're trying to build. So when they're talking about Libra and their sixth attempt at making a failed cryptocurrency, then what they're really trying to do is bring in this global world cash that they maintain and they manage.
Right. So it's like Bitcoin